The road did not appear on any map. At least, that was what Ryan believed when he first saw it. He had been driving for nearly 6 hours through the mountains of Northern California. The highway was empty, the sky dark, and his phone had no signal. It was almost midnight. Ryan rubbed his eyes and leaned forward over the steering wheel. The GPS screen had frozen an hour ago. The only light on the road came from his headlights cutting through the thick fog. Great, he muttered. He hated driving at night. Especially on roads like this. 2 lanes, no streetlights, endless forest on both sides. The kind of road where anything could be hiding just beyond the trees. Ryan turned on the radio, hoping to find a station. Static. He tried another channel. Static again. Then suddenly, a voice. But it wasn't music. It sounded like someone whispering. Ryan frowned and turned the volume up. Turn back. The voice was faint, almost buried in the static. Don't go further? Ryan immediately switched the radio off. Yeah, no thanks. He laughed nervously and kept driving. A few minutes later, something strange appeared ahead. A road sign. Ryan slowed down. The sign looked old, almost rusted. It read, "Last exit 2 miles." Ryan blinked. That's weird. He had been driving for hours and hadn't seen any exits. Still, he felt relieved. Maybe there was a gas station or a small town nearby. His fuel gauge was almost empty. 2 miles later, another sign appeared. But this one made Ryan uneasy. It read, "Last exit, turn now." The arrow pointed to a narrow road disappearing into the forest. Ryan hesitated. The road looked barely used. Cracked pavement. Trees leaning over it. No lights. But his fuel gauge was almost on empty. He sighed. Well, guess I don't have a choice. Ryan turned the wheel. His car slowly rolled onto the exit road. The moment he left the highway, the fog became thicker. The forest closed in around him. The road narrowed. After a minute, the highway disappeared behind him completely. Ryan checked the rearview mirror. Only darkness. No problem, he told himself. Just find a gas station and get back on the highway. But the road kept going. And going. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. There were no buildings. No houses. No lights. Just endless trees. Ryan felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. That doesn't make sense. An exit should lead somewhere. But this road seemed to lead nowhere. Then suddenly, headlights appeared behind him. Ryan jumped. A car. It was coming fast. Too fast. Ryan checked his mirror again. The headlights were getting closer. But something felt wrong. He couldn't see the shape of the car. Only the lights. Bright. Blinding. As if they were floating in the darkness. Ryan slowed down slightly to let the car pass. But it didn't pass. Instead, it stayed behind him. Keeping the exact same distance. Ryan frowned. Okay, that's creepy. He sped up. The headlights sped up too. Ryan slowed down. They slowed down. They were following him. Ryan's heart started beating faster. All right, enough of this. He pressed the gas pedal. The car accelerated down the dark road. The trees blurred past his windows. But the headlights stayed behind him. Always the same distance. Always watching. Then suddenly, the radio turned on by itself. Ryan froze. Static filled the car. Then the whisper returned. You shouldn't have taken this road. Ryan slammed his hand against the radio. It turned off again. His breathing became heavy. This is stupid. He tried to calm himself. Probably just another driver. Probably just electrical issues. But then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The headlights behind him were getting higher. Much higher. Higher than any normal car. Ryan looked again. The lights now sat far above the road. At least 10 feet high. And slowly rising. Like something enormous was standing up behind him. Ryan's hands trembled on the steering wheel. What the hell is that? The road ahead suddenly curved sharply. Ryan turned the wheel. And slammed the brakes. Because something stood in the middle of the road. A man. Tall. Completely still. His face hidden in shadow. Ryan's car screeched to a stop just a few feet away. The man did not move. Did not blink. Did not speak. Ryan rolled down his window slightly. Hey, are you okay? The man slowly lifted his head. And when the headlights hit his face, Ryan realized something terrible. The man had no eyes. Just two dark, empty holes. Then the eyeless man smiled and whispered a single sentence. You took the last exit. Ryan's engine suddenly died. The headlights behind him went out. The forest became completely silent. And the man in the road started walking toward the car. Ryan's engine died. The car went completely silent. Only the ticking sound of the cooling engine filled the air. In front of the headlights stood the man. Tall, thin, his face pale and unnatural. And where his eyes should have been, there were only two dark holes. Ryan's chest tightened. The man smiled slowly. You took the last exit. Ryan didn't know what to say. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to drive away. But the engine wouldn't start. Ryan turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. The man took another slow step toward the car. Crunch. His foot pressed into the gravel. Another step. Crunch. Ryan's breathing became faster. Stay back, Ryan said through the half-open window. The man stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then the man tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something Ryan couldn't hear. You shouldn't have taken this road, the man whispered. Ryan's hand tightened around the steering wheel. What road? The man's smile grew wider. This road. Ryan felt anger replacing his fear. Yeah? Then tell me how to get back to the highway. The man said nothing. Instead, he slowly lifted one hand and pointed behind Ryan's car. Ryan glanced at the rearview mirror. Darkness. The headlights that had been following him were gone. Ryan turned back toward the man. What are you talking about? The man lowered his hand. There is no highway anymore. Ryan felt a chill crawl up his spine. That's not funny. But the man didn't laugh. In fact, his smile slowly disappeared. Everyone says that, he murmured. Ryan shook his head. This is stupid. He turned the key again. The engine coughed. Once. Twice. Then suddenly, it started. Ryan didn't waste a second. He slammed the gas pedal. The tires spun and the car shot forward. The man without eyes disappeared into the darkness behind him. Ryan didn't look back. He just drove. Faster. The road stretched ahead, winding deeper into the forest. Ryan kept expecting to see the highway again. But it never appeared. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The road looked exactly the same. Endless trees. Endless darkness. Ryan's hands began to sweat. That guy's messing with me, he muttered. There has to be a way back. Then something strange happened. Ryan saw a sign. A familiar sign. His stomach dropped when he read it. Last exit. Turn now. Ryan slammed the brakes. That's impossible. He had already passed that sign earlier. He was sure of it. But there it was again. The exact same sign. The same rust. The same crooked pole. Ryan turned around in his seat. The road behind him stretched into darkness. No highway. No exit. Just the same road he had been driving on. Ryan grabbed his phone. Still no signal. Okay, he whispered to himself. This is not happening. He started driving again. 10 minutes later, another sign appeared. Ryan slowed down. His heart pounded harder. It was the same sign again. Last exit 2 miles. Ryan slammed his fist on the steering wheel. What the hell is this place? The forest around him remained silent. Then suddenly, his radio turned on again. Static filled the car. Ryan reached to turn it off. But before he could, a voice spoke through the speakers. A different voice this time. A woman. You're still alive? Ryan froze. Hello? The voice sounded weak, like someone whispering from far away. If you hear me, don't stop driving. Ryan leaned closer to the radio. Who is this? They're watching the road. Ryan's eyes moved to the windshield. The forest felt darker now. More crowded. Don't let them stop you. The signal crackled. If you stop, you'll never leave. Ryan felt his pulse racing. What do you mean? But the radio suddenly went silent again. Then, A loud thump hit the roof of the car. Ryan jumped. Another thump. Something had landed on top of the vehicle. Slowly, very slowly, something began crawling across the roof. Ryan could hear its movement. Scrape, scrape, scrape. His breathing stopped. Then something slid down the windshield. A pale hand. Long fingers pressed against the glass. Ryan looked up and saw the face, pressed against the windshield from above. The same man. The man without eyes. But this time he wasn't smiling. He looked angry. And behind him, Ryan saw more shapes moving in the trees. Tall figures, standing between the trunks, watching the road, waiting. The eyeless man leaned closer to the glass and whispered something Ryan could hear even through the windshield. You were supposed to turn around. Ryan's engine suddenly shut off again. The headlights flickered, and the forest around the road began filling with people who had no eyes. Ryan couldn't breathe. The windshield was covered by the pale face of the eyeless man. His skin pressed against the glass like wet paper. And those empty holes where his eyes should be were staring directly into Ryan's soul. More shapes appeared between the trees. Tall figures, dozens of them, standing silently in the darkness. All of them facing the road. All of them watching Ryan. Ryan's hands shook on the steering wheel. Get off my car. The eyeless man didn't move. Instead, his mouth slowly opened. Too wide. Much wider than a normal person's mouth should open. Then he whispered through the glass. You can't leave. Ryan slammed the horn. The loud blast echoed through the forest. For a second, everything froze. Then suddenly, the engine roared back to life. Ryan didn't think. He hit the gas pedal. The car shot forward violently. The eyeless man slid off the windshield and disappeared into the darkness. Ryan drove as fast as he could. 80 miles per hour. The trees blurred into black walls on both sides. Ryan kept looking in the mirrors. Nothing behind him, but that didn't make him feel safer. If anything, it made him feel worse. The forest looked wrong. Too still. Too quiet, like the whole place was holding its breath. Ryan gripped the wheel tighter. Just keep driving, he whispered. That woman said don't stop. The road stretched endlessly ahead. Minutes passed. Ryan didn't slow down, didn't blink. Then something appeared in the distance. A car, parked on the side of the road. Ryan slowed slightly. Its headlights were off. The car looked abandoned. He drove closer and realized something strange. The driver's door was open. Ryan rolled past slowly. Then he saw movement inside the car. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A woman. She suddenly lifted her head. Ryan slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly before stopping. The woman inside the car looked terrified. Her face was pale, her hair messy. She jumped out of the vehicle and ran toward Ryan's car. Ryan rolled the window down slightly. Are you the one on the radio? He asked. The woman nodded quickly. Yes. Her voice trembled. You heard me? Ryan unlocked the passenger door. Get in. She jumped inside and slammed the door shut. Drive, she said immediately. Ryan hit the gas again. They sped down the dark road. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan finally asked, What is this place? The woman stared out the windshield. Her hands were shaking. This road, she swallowed hard, doesn't let people leave. Ryan sighed angrily. Yeah, the eyeless guy already told me that. Her head snapped toward him. You saw one of them? Ryan nodded. He climbed on my car. The woman closed her eyes. Then it's already too late. Ryan felt a chill crawl through his body. What do you mean? She hesitated, then said quietly. They used to be people. Ryan glanced at her. What? Drivers, she said. Like us. Ryan's grip tightened on the wheel. People who took the last exit. Ryan looked ahead at the endless road. That doesn't make sense. She shook her head slowly. Nothing here makes sense. The forest outside seemed darker now. Almost alive. How long have you been here? Ryan asked. The woman didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I think, 3 days. Ryan nearly swerved. 3 days? She nodded. My car ran out of gas. Ryan checked his fuel gauge. His stomach dropped. The needle was almost on empty. Then the woman suddenly grabbed his arm. Don't slow down. Ryan looked ahead and froze. There were people standing on the road. Dozens of them, blocking the way. All of them pale. All of them staring. And none of them had eyes. Ryan slammed the gas pedal. The car sped directly toward them. For a moment, the figures didn't move. Then suddenly, they stepped aside, clearing the road. Ryan drove through them, but as the car passed, every single one of them turned their heads to follow it. Watching, waiting. Ryan's heart pounded violently. Why did they move? The woman whispered the answer. Because they know something we don't. Ryan's stomach tightened. What? The woman slowly pointed ahead. Ryan looked at the road and felt the blood drain from his face. Because standing in the middle of the road was something much taller than the others. At least 12 feet high. Its arms hung unnaturally long. Its body thin like stretched wire. And unlike the others, this one had eyes. Large, black, shining in the headlights. The woman whispered in terror. That's the one who makes the road. The creature slowly began walking toward them. Ryan slammed the brakes. But something worse happened. The engine died again. The headlights flickered, and the tall creature smiled. Because now, Ryan's car had finally stopped. The engine died. Again. Ryan stared at the dashboard in disbelief. Come on, come on. He turned the key. Nothing. Outside the windshield, the tall creature continued walking toward the car. Slow, unhurried, as if it already knew Ryan had nowhere to go. The woman beside him whispered in panic. Don't let it reach the car. Ryan's voice trembled. I'm trying. He turned the key again. Still nothing. The creature stepped into the headlights. Ryan finally saw it clearly. Its body was impossibly thin. Too tall. Its arms hung almost to the ground. But what truly froze Ryan's blood was its face. It had eyes. Many of them. Dozens of small black eyes covering its head like insects. All blinking. All staring at the car. The woman pressed herself against the seat. That's the collector. Ryan swallowed hard. The what? The one who makes the road, she whispered. It collects people. Ryan's heart pounded louder. What does it want? The woman's answer came quietly. Eyes. Ryan felt a cold wave wash through his body. What? The creature took another long step closer. Crunch. Its long fingers dragged across the asphalt. The woman continued speaking, her voice shaking. When someone takes this road, it watches them. Ryan kept turning the key again and again. Nothing. The creature was getting closer. When they stop driving, she said, the collector takes their eyes. Ryan looked at her. And the others? The eyeless ones? She nodded slowly. They're what's left. Ryan's stomach twisted. They were drivers who stopped. The creature stopped about 20 feet from the car. All its many eyes stared directly at Ryan. Then it spoke. Its voice sounded like many whispers layered together. You stopped. Ryan's heart nearly exploded. The creature took another step. You belong to the road now. Ryan slammed the steering wheel. Start. Suddenly, the engine roared to life. Ryan didn't hesitate. He slammed the gas pedal. The car shot forward. The creature moved faster than Ryan expected. Its long arms swung toward the windshield. Ryan swerved at the last second. The creature's fingers scraped across the side of the car. Screech. Metal screamed as deep scratches carved into the door. Ryan sped past it. The creature turned slowly, watching them leave, but it didn't chase. Ryan glanced in the mirror. The creature was already shrinking into the distance, standing still in the road. Then suddenly, all the eyeless figures in the forest began moving. They stepped out from the trees, walking slowly toward the road, toward the creature. Ryan's voice shook. Why aren't they attacking us? The woman looked back through the rear window. They don't need to. Ryan frowned. What do you mean? She turned back toward him. Because the road always wins. Ryan drove faster. The speedometer climbed past 90. The forest blurred around them. Then something new appeared ahead. Lights. Ryan leaned forward. Buildings. Small buildings. A town. Ryan almost laughed. A town. Finally. The woman's face turned pale. No. Ryan slowed slightly. Old streetlights flickered above empty sidewalks. Dusty storefronts lined the road. It looked abandoned, but it was definitely a town. Ryan pulled into the main street. The engine was still running. For the first time since entering the road, Ryan felt a small amount of hope. "See," he said, "we're getting out of here." The woman stared out the window silently. Something about the town made her uneasy. The buildings were old, very old. Most of the windows were broken. And every street was empty. Then Ryan saw something that made him stop smiling. Cars. Dozens of them. Parked along the road. Rusty. Covered in dust. Some with doors still open. Ryan slowed the car. "These look abandoned." The woman whispered something under her breath. Ryan turned to her. "What?" Her voice shook. "This isn't a town." Ryan looked ahead. At the silent buildings. At the endless rows of abandoned vehicles. Then he saw the sign hanging above the main street. His heart dropped. The sign read, "Welcome to Last Exit." Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. Because beneath the sign stood a group of people watching the car. Dozens of them, standing silently in the street. None of them had eyes. And behind them, far down the road, the tall creature had begun walking toward the town. Ryan slowed the car as it rolled into the silent street. The engine hummed softly, the only normal sound in a place that felt completely wrong. Dozens of people stood ahead, all of them facing the car, all of them pale, and none of them had eyes. Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The woman beside him whispered, "Don't stop too long." But Ryan had already slowed almost to a stop. The eyeless people did not move. They simply stood there, watching, or at least, facing. Ryan swallowed hard. "Are they alive?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yes." Ryan looked again. Their bodies moved slightly, breathing, shifting. They were alive, just empty. Ryan carefully drove forward. As the car passed them, their heads slowly turned, following the sound of the engine. Ryan shivered. "They can hear us," the woman whispered. "That's how they survive." Ryan looked down the street. The town looked abandoned at first glance. But the longer he looked, the more details he noticed. Lights flickering inside some buildings. Curtains moving slightly in broken windows. Footsteps echoing somewhere far away. People were here, living here. Ryan stopped the car in the middle of the street. "We should find someone who still has eyes." The woman nodded. "There are some." Ryan stepped out of the car cautiously. The cold air hit his face immediately. The town smelled strange, like rust and damp wood. The eyeless people slowly moved aside as Ryan walked past them. None of them touched him. But their heads kept turning toward him. Listening. Ryan felt like he was being surrounded by ghosts. The woman stepped out of the car beside him. "Stay close," she said quietly. Ryan nodded. They walked toward the nearest building. A small diner. The sign above the door hung crooked. The glass window was cracked. Inside, a dim yellow light flickered. Ryan slowly pushed the door open. The bell above it rang softly. Ding! Immediately, someone inside shouted, "Close the door." Ryan jumped and quickly shut it. Inside the diner were 6 people. 4 men, 2 women, all of them staring at Ryan and the woman. All of them with eyes. Real eyes. One of the men stood up slowly. He looked tired, his beard long and unshaven. "How did you get here?" he asked. Ryan answered immediately. "The last exit." The man sighed deeply. "Yeah, that's how everyone gets here." Ryan stepped further inside. "So this place is real?" The man nodded. "This is last exit." The woman beside Ryan asked quietly, "How long have you been here?" The man rubbed his face. "Hard to say." Another woman at the table spoke. "Time doesn't work right on this road." Ryan felt uneasy. "What does that mean?" The bearded man pointed to the window. "Some people have been here a few days." He paused. "Some have been here 20 years. Ryan laughed nervously. "That's not possible." The man didn't smile. You'll stop thinking that soon. Ryan sat down slowly. Okay, then tell me how we leave. The room became quiet. No one answered. Ryan's voice grew louder. There has to be a way off the road. The man leaned forward. There is. Ryan felt hope rise again. How? The man pointed outside. Keep driving. Ryan frowned. That's what we've been doing. The man shook his head slowly. No. His voice became serious. You have to drive all the way to the end. Ryan asked the obvious question. Where is the end? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the clock on the wall. The clock read 11:42 p.m. Then the man spoke quietly. You won't want to see it. Ryan's stomach tightened. What happens there? Before the man could answer, someone outside screamed. A horrible, desperate scream. Everyone in the diner froze. The bearded man whispered, "It's here." Ryan felt ice run through his veins. What is? The man looked toward the window. The collector. Outside, the streetlights flickered violently. The eyeless people in the street suddenly began running. Running blindly in every direction. Trying to hide. Trying to escape. Ryan rushed to the window. At the far end of the street, something tall stepped between the buildings. Taller than the rooftops. Its dozens of black eyes glowed in the darkness. The collector had arrived in the town. And it was looking for someone. Ryan whispered in horror. Why is it here? The man behind him gave the answer. Because every night, his voice trembled, the road takes another pair of eyes. The collector slowly walked deeper into the town. And somewhere in the darkness, someone else began screaming. The rain had not stopped since the night they found the hidden cellar. For 3 days, the sky above the forest remained dark and heavy, as if the clouds themselves were afraid to move. The cabin stood silently among the trees, its wooden walls soaked with rain and something else, something older. Ethan could barely sleep. Every night, the same sound woke him. Whispers. Soft, broken voices drifting through the walls. At first he thought it was the wind. But on the third night, he heard words. Come outside. The voice sounded weak, desperate, almost human. Ethan sat up in bed, his heart pounding. The room was dark except for faint moonlight leaking through the window. Across the room, Mark was asleep on the floor. Or at least he looked asleep. Ethan listened again. The whisper returned. Ethan? His blood froze. The voice knew his name. He slowly stood and walked to the window. Outside, the forest was thick with fog. And there, between the trees, something moved. A figure. Tall. Still. Watching the cabin. Ethan leaned closer to the glass. The figure did not move. But suddenly, more shapes appeared behind it. 1, 2, 5, 10, dozens, all standing silently in the fog. None of them moved. None of them spoke. But Ethan could feel their eyes staring at him. He stepped back from the window. What the hell? He whispered. Behind him, Mark suddenly spoke. You see them too, don't you? Ethan turned around sharply. Mark was sitting upright now, staring at the door. His face looked pale. How long have you been awake? Ethan asked. Mark didn't answer. Instead, he said quietly. They're not people. Ethan's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Mark slowly looked at him. Those are the ones the cabin already ate. Silence filled the room. Outside, the fog grew thicker. Then, a loud knock hit the cabin door. Bang! Both men jumped. Another knock. Bang! Bang! And then, a voice from outside. A woman's voice. Soft. Weak. Please, help me? Ethan looked at Mark. Mark's eyes were wide with fear. Don't open it, Mark whispered. The voice outside began crying. I'm lost. I can't find the road. Another knock. Please. Ethan stepped toward the door. Ethan, Mark said urgently. Don't. But Ethan hesitated, because the voice sounded real. Human. Desperate. Another knock. Then the voice changed. Slightly deeper. Almost distorted. Let me in? The cabin walls creaked. The floorboards groaned, as if the house itself was waking up. Outside, the figures in the fog slowly began moving closer. Step by step, toward the cabin. Mark whispered something Ethan barely heard. The cabin is hungry again. The knocking became violent. Bang, bang, bang. Dust fell from the ceiling. The door handle began to slowly turn. Ethan grabbed a chair and shoved it against the door. "Help me," he shouted. Mark rushed forward. They pushed furniture against the entrance. But the knocking stopped. Suddenly, silence. Heavy, unnatural silence. Then, a scratching sound began under the floor. Slow, dragging, like something crawling beneath the cabin. Something large, something patient. Ethan and Mark froze. The scratching moved across the floorboards, toward the stairs, toward the trapdoor, the one that led to the cellar. Mark whispered, "It's coming from below." The trapdoor began shaking. Once, twice, then something slammed against it from the inside. Boom. Ethan felt his legs shaking. "Whatever is down there," he said. "It wants out." Mark looked at him with horror. "No," he whispered. "It doesn't want out." He slowly pointed at the door. "It wants more people inside." Outside the cabin, the fog figures were now standing right next to the walls. Dozens of silent shapes, waiting, listening, hungry. And the cabin was starting to breathe. The trapdoor shook again. Boom. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the wooden floor trembled under Ethan's feet. The sound coming from below was no longer scratching. It was pounding. Something large was slamming against the underside of the cellar door. Mark backed away slowly. "We shouldn't have opened that cellar," he whispered. Ethan stared at the trapdoor in the middle of the floor. The wooden boards around it creaked as if the cabin itself was under pressure. Boom. Another violent hit. The chair they had placed against the front door slid slightly across the floor. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living wall. And then, a long, slow scraping sound moved across the underside of the floor. It sounded like fingernails dragging along wood. Dozens of them. Ethan swallowed. "How many things are down there?" Mark shook his head. "I don't think it's how many." He paused. "I think it's how long they've been there." The pounding stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then a voice drifted up through the trapdoor. Weak. Broken. "Help us?" Ethan froze. That sounded human. Mark grabbed his arm tightly. "Don't listen to it." The voice came again. "We're trapped?" Another voice joined it. Then another. Soon dozens of voices were whispering beneath the floor. "Help us. Open the door. Let us out." The sound was horrifying. It was like a crowd of people buried alive. Ethan stepped closer to the trapdoor despite himself. What if they really are trapped down there? Mark's grip tightened. "No." His voice shook. "Those are the voices of people who already died here." Ethan felt cold run through his spine. "Then what's speaking?" Mark whispered. "The cabin." Suddenly the whispers turned into screaming. Hands slammed violently against the underside of the trapdoor. Boom, boom, boom. The wooden latch began bending. Ethan jumped back. "It's going to break." At that exact moment, a loud crash came from the front window. Crack. Both men spun around. One of the fog figures had reached the cabin. A pale hand pressed against the glass. Another appeared beside it, then another. Soon the entire window was covered with gray, lifeless hands. Faces slowly pushed against the glass. Dozens of them, eyes wide, mouths hanging open, all staring into the cabin. Ethan whispered in terror. "They're trying to get in." Mark shook his head slowly. "No." His voice was barely audible. "They're trying to warn us." The faces outside began opening their mouths. All at the same time. And from outside came a horrible whisper. "Run." Then the trapdoor exploded open. The wood splintered upward. A black shape shot out of the cellar like smoke. It moved too fast to see clearly. Ethan felt something brush past his shoulder. Cold, wet, rotting. Then the cabin lights flickered. Once, twice. Darkness swallowed the room. In the pitch-black silence, Ethan heard breathing. Not Mark's. Something else. Something moving slowly across the floor. Then a voice spoke from behind him. Very close to his ear. "You shouldn't have stayed." Ethan turned. But nothing was there. Across the room, Mark suddenly screamed. The sound cut through the darkness. It's taking them. The floorboards began cracking. From below, long pale arms forced their way through the broken trapdoor. Hands clawed onto the floor. Dozens of them, reaching, grabbing, pulling themselves upward. The things beneath the cabin were finally coming out. And outside, the fog figures began walking away. Slowly, as if they already knew what was about to happen. Ethan realized something terrible. The cabin didn't eat people right away. First, it trapped them, then it waited, and now, it was feeding. The arms were everywhere. Long, pale hands crawled out of the shattered trapdoor like spiders, gripping the wooden floor. Their fingers were thin and twisted, nails cracked and black. Ethan stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mark was struggling near the wall, trying to pull himself away as two of the arms wrapped around his ankle. The grip was impossibly strong. "Get them off," Mark screamed. Ethan grabbed the nearest chair and swung it down hard. Crack. One of the arms snapped with a sickening sound, but another immediately replaced it, reaching higher, grabbing Mark's leg again. The arms weren't stopping. More and more were climbing out of the cellar. Some dragged themselves across the floor like worms, elbows bending in unnatural directions. Others clawed up the sides of the broken trapdoor. And then Ethan realized something horrifying. The arms weren't connected to bodies. They were just arms. Detached. Alive. Moving on their own. Mark kicked wildly. "They're pulling me down." The floorboards around the trapdoor began to crack under the pressure of so many grasping hands. Ethan grabbed Mark's arm and pulled. For a moment it worked. Mark slid across the floor toward him. But then something deeper in the cellar moved. A sound rose from below. A low, wet breathing. Slow, heavy. The arms froze for a second. Then they began pulling harder. Much harder. Mark screamed again as his body was dragged halfway toward the opening. Ethan planted his feet and held on. "I've got you." But the thing beneath the cabin was stronger. The arms tightened. Suddenly Mark stopped struggling. His eyes went wide. "Ethan?" His voice trembled. "It's inside my head." "What?" Mark's face went pale. "I can hear it talking." Ethan felt cold fear spread through his chest. "What is it saying?" Mark stared at the dark hole in the floor. Tears began forming in his eyes. "It says, we're already inside it." Ethan didn't understand. But then the cabin creaked. The walls shifted. The floor tilted slightly, like something huge was moving underneath the entire structure. A deep groaning sound echoed through the wood. The cabin itself was changing. The trapdoor widened. Boards around it bent outward like broken teeth. The cellar wasn't a room anymore. It was a pit. A black, endless pit. And from that darkness something enormous slowly rose. Not a creature. Not exactly. It looked like a mass of roots. Thick, twisting roots covered in pale skin. They stretched upward, pulsing slowly like veins. Dozens of faces were embedded inside the flesh. Frozen faces. Screaming, whispering, crying. All the lost people the cabin had taken. Their mouths moved silently. Ethan's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The thing beneath the cabin wasn't a monster. It was a nest. A feeding ground. The cabin above was just the trap. Mark suddenly gasped. His body jerked violently. One of the pale arms wrapped around his throat. Another clamped over his mouth. His eyes locked onto Ethan. Pure terror filled them. Then the arms dragged him downward. Ethan lunged forward. No. But Mark's fingers slipped through his hands. In seconds he was gone. Pulled screaming into the black pit below. The arms vanished after him. The trapdoor area slowly closed again as the warped floorboards shifted back into place. Like nothing had happened. The cabin groaned softly. Satisfied. Ethan stood frozen. His mind was numb. Mark was gone. The cabin had taken him. Then Ethan heard something behind him. A slow creaking sound. He turned. The front door was opening. But no one was there. Outside, the fog had returned. And in the fog stood the silent figures again. But now Ethan noticed something new. One of them looked familiar. The shape stepped closer to the porch. The fog thinned around its face. Ethan felt his stomach drop. It was Mark. His skin had turned pale gray. His eyes were empty, but his body was standing outside the cabin. Watching. Slowly, Mark lifted his hand. He pointed at Ethan. Then all the figures in the fog turned their heads toward the cabin at the same time and began walking forward, because the cabin was still hungry. And Ethan was the only one left inside. Ethan couldn't move. Through the fog outside the cabin, dozens of figures were slowly walking toward the porch. All of them moved the same way. Slow, silent, their feet barely lifted from the ground. And at the front of them was Mark. Or what used to be Mark. His face was pale and empty, like the life had been drained out of him. His eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them. Just darkness. Ethan stepped backward until his shoulders hit the wall. No, no, no. Mark reached the porch. His head tilted slightly, like he was studying Ethan through the window. Then his mouth opened. A voice came out, but it wasn't Mark's. It was deeper, older. We told you to run. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. You're dead, he whispered. Mark's body didn't react. The thing inside him smiled slowly. Not dead. A long pause. Changed. Behind him, the other fog figures stopped moving. They stood perfectly still in the yard. Dozens of them. Watching the cabin. Watching Ethan. Ethan's eyes darted around the room. The back door. The windows. Every exit. But then he realized something terrible. The walls were moving. The wooden boards were shifting slowly, tightening inward like the cabin was shrinking. The house wasn't just trapping him. It was closing around him. Like a stomach. Mark stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked under his weight. You can still come with us, the voice said. Ethan shook his head violently. No. Mark lifted one pale hand and placed it against the glass. The same way the fog figures had done earlier. Except this time the glass began to frost over instantly. A thin layer of ice spread across the window. You're already part of the forest, the voice continued. Ethan backed away from the window. I'm not staying here. You already stayed too long. The cabin groaned again. A loud cracking sound came from the floor. Ethan looked down. The wooden boards beneath his feet were splitting open. Thin black roots pushed up through the cracks. They moved slowly, searching, like worms smelling food. Ethan jumped away just before one wrapped around his boot. Jesus! He ran toward the back of the cabin. But the hallway looked different now. Longer, darker. The walls leaned inward as if trying to crush the narrow space. And the whispering had returned. Hundreds of voices murmuring inside the wood. Stay. Join us. You're already lost? Ethan covered his ears. But the voices weren't outside. They were inside his head. He reached the back door. It wouldn't open. He pulled harder. The handle twisted, but the door didn't move. Something on the other side was holding it shut. Then a slow scratching sound came from the other side of the wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was carving into the door. Ethan stepped back. The scratching stopped. Then 3 deep gouges suddenly tore through the wood from the outside. Crack. A thin beam of fog pushed through the broken door. And inside that fog was another face. Not Mark. Someone older. A man Ethan had never seen before. The man's eyes locked onto him. You shouldn't fight it, the man whispered. We all tried. Behind Ethan, the front door slammed open. Bang. Cold fog flooded into the cabin. Ethan turned slowly. All the figures were standing inside now. Dozens of pale bodies. Silent. Still. Mark stepped forward again. You hear it now, don't you? Ethan shook his head, but he knew the truth. He did hear it. A deep voice. Far below the ground. The same voice Mark had heard earlier. The thing beneath the cabin. And now it was speaking directly to him. Inside his mind, a slow whisper crawled through his thoughts. You found your way here. Ethan's vision blurred. His knees nearly buckled. The whisper continued. Just like the others, the figures in the cabin slowly turned their heads toward the floor. Toward the trapdoor. which was opening again. This time slowly, patiently. The darkness below it looked deeper than before. Endless. Waiting. The voice whispered again. Come down. Ethan felt something pulling him forward. Like gravity had shifted. The cabin groaned loudly. Outside, the forest wind began to howl. Branches slammed against the walls. The whisper became louder, stronger. You belong here now. Ethan took one step toward the trapdoor. Then another. The figures around him watched silently. Mark's empty eyes followed every movement. And deep beneath the cabin, something enormous was waking up. Something that had been waiting a very long time. For Ethan. Ethan's feet moved on their own. Step by step, he walked toward the open trapdoor. The darkness inside the cellar looked endless, like a hole cut into the earth itself. The whisper in his mind grew stronger. Come down. Come home. Around him, the silent figures stood perfectly still. Their empty eyes followed him as he approached the opening in the floor. Mark stood closest. His pale face showed no emotion. But his lips slowly moved. Don't fight it. Ethan stopped just a few feet from the trapdoor. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Somewhere deep inside his mind, a small part of him was still fighting. No, he whispered. The voice beneath the cabin laughed softly. A deep, wet sound that seemed to shake the floorboards. You already belong to me. Suddenly Ethan remembered something. Earlier that night, before the fog, before Mark was taken, he remembered the map they had used to find the cabin. It wasn't on any official road. They had followed a trail someone had posted online. A story, a warning. The post had said, if you find the cabin, do not stay after dark. Ethan's breathing became sharp. The warning hadn't been about ghosts. It had been about the cabin itself. The trap. The voice spoke again. Come down. Ethan's body leaned forward slightly. The pull was getting stronger. His mind felt heavy. Slow. The figures around him began whispering. Join us. Stay. You're lost now. Mark stepped closer. Only inches away. His cold hand slowly reached toward Ethan's shoulder. And at that moment, Ethan snapped out of it. No. He shoved Mark backward. Mark's body stumbled into two of the fog figures behind him. The moment the connection broke, the pressure inside Ethan's mind vanished. He ran. Straight toward the front door. The cabin reacted instantly. The floorboards split open. Roots burst through the wood, grabbing at his legs. One wrapped around his ankle. Ethan fell hard onto the floor. The whisper became furious. You cannot leave. The roots tightened, dragging him backward toward the trapdoor. The pit below opened wider. The horrible breathing from below echoed through the cabin. Ethan grabbed the broken leg of a chair and slammed it against the root. Once, twice, 3 times. The root snapped. Ethan kicked free and scrambled toward the open doorway. Cold fog rolled across the floor. The forest outside looked darker than before. Almost black, but it was still freedom. He ran out the door. The moment his foot touched the ground outside, the forest exploded with noise. Wind howled. Trees bent violently. Behind him the cabin screamed. The sound came from deep underground. A monstrous roar of anger. Ethan ran through the fog as fast as he could. Branches tore at his clothes. Roots tried to trip him. But he kept running, for what felt like hours. Until finally, the fog began to thin. The trees spread apart, and a narrow road appeared ahead. Ethan collapsed onto the gravel, breathing hard, alive. Morning sunlight slowly began rising over the horizon. Birds started singing. The forest looked normal again. Quiet, empty, no fog, no whispers, no cabin. Ethan laughed weakly. He had escaped, or so he thought. A few days later, Ethan sat in his apartment in the city. Safe, far away from the forest. But something felt wrong. Every night he had the same dream. The same whisper. Come back. That evening he turned on his computer. His email inbox had one new message. No sender name. Just a file attachment. Confused, Ethan opened it. It was a photograph. A photograph of a cabin deep in the woods. The same cabin. But something had changed. In the picture, a new figure stood on the porch, watching the camera. A man. Pale skin. Empty eyes. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Because the man in the photo was him. The whisper returned in his mind. Soft. Patient. You never left. Outside Ethan's apartment window, fog slowly began creeping down the street. And somewhere far away in the forest, the cabin waited, hungry again, for the next lost traveler.